For over 2,000 years, they stood in silence, an entire army of warriors carved from clay, hidden beneath the soil of China. They were believed to be guardians of the dead, protectors of an emperor's dream of eternal rule. But in early 2025, something changed. One of them spoke not in words, but through the haunting detail of a newly unearthed figure so precise, so different, that it shook the foundation of everything archaeologists believed about the Terracotta army. This wasn't just another soldier, it was something darker, a message, a warning. It began as just another routine dig. Archaeologists had been working in Pit 1 of the Terracotta site near Xi'an for decades. Most finds were familiar soldiers, horses, chariots, all arranged with military precision. But this time, the soil gave up a secret no one expected. A towering figure, draped in armor unlike any before, eyes hollow yet fierce, lips curled ever so slightly, as if mid-command. Dr. Mei Lin, who had studied the site for over 15 years, paused the moment the dust cleared from its face. It wasn't like the others, she said. It didn't feel ceremonial. It felt alive. This general, if that's what he was, bore markings unlike anything previously, cataloged strange symbols across his breastplate, a crown-shaped headdress, and most chilling of all, faint traces of red paint, still clinging to the clay like dried blood. The discovery triggered international attention. Scholars rushed to decode the markings. Were they battle honors, a secret code, or something more prophetic? One theory even suggested the symbols were tied to early forms of divination, warnings about future catastrophe. What could this statue mean? Was it modeled after a real general? Did it hold some forgotten status among Qin Shi Huang's elite guard? And why did its design differ so drastically from the thousands of others? These were just the first of many questions. And they weren't just historical, they were existential. Because if this statue really was a message from the past, then what exactly was it warning us about? It was March 1974. A brutal drought had parched the land around Shang village, near Xi'an in China's Shanxi province. The sun was relentless, the crops were dying, and the wells had run dry. Desperate for water, a small group of farmers turned to the one thing they had left, the soil beneath their feet. Among them was young Jifa, a quiet but determined man. Along with his brothers, he began digging a new well on a patch of dry, cracked land. They weren't searching for treasure, only survival. But with every strike of their shovels, they moved closer to one of the greatest archaeological discoveries in human history. The digging was slow. The earth was stubborn and dry. A few feet down, they struck something odd, fragments of what looked like pottery. At first, no one thought much of it. This was ancient land, rich with forgotten pasts. Broken pottery was almost expected, but then came bronze arrowhead, sharp, still gleaming, that made them pause. Then it appeared, a head. Not a skull but an earthen head, eerily lifelike, eyes fixed in a stern, timeless stare. It looked ancient, it looked real. More pieces followed, a torso, a hand, a warrior's boot, dozens more. These weren't crude figurines or religious idols. They were something else entirely, crafted with astonishing precision. Armor was etched with intricate patterns. Each face bore unique expressions. The bodies stood in stances that radiated readiness, purpose, pride. Young Jifa joked nervously that they might have disturbed the dead, but something in him knew this was no joke. They had uncovered something vast. Authorities were alerted. Archaeologist Xiao Kangman was among the first to arrive. He took one look and felt his pulse rise. These were not random statues. This was a military formation, perfectly arranged beneath the earth. The scale was unimaginable. As word spread, the quiet farming village became a swarm of excavation activity. Bulldozers replaced oxen, journalists replaced neighbors, and what began as a dig for water turned into a door to the past. Xiang village, once anonymous, now held the keys to a forgotten empire. And it all started with a farmer's determination. A shovel, and the dry, cracked earth that refused to give water but gave up history instead. To understand the Terracotta army, we have to understand the man who built it and what drove him to such extremes. His name was Qin Shi Huang, and he wasn't just any emperor. He was the first. Born in 259 BCE as Ying Zhang, he rose to power in a time of chaos. China was divided into warring states, each vying for control, each soaked in bloodshed. But through ruthless strategy, relentless ambition, and a vision no one else dared to follow, Ying Zhang unified them all. In 221 BC, he declared himself Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. His rule marked the beginning of a new era. For the first time, a single leader commanded all of China. And he wanted more than unity, he wanted permanence. He ordered the standardization of currency, weights, measures, and even writing, ensuring that every part of his empire followed one system, one vision, one voice. His roads were built. The foundations of the Great Wall were laid. Provinces were reorganized into a tightly controlled bureaucracy. But Qin Shi Huang's methods were often as brutal as they were effective. Dissent was crushed without mercy. Books that didn't align with his ideology were burned in massive fires. Scholars who defied him faced imprisonment, execution, or forced labor. The message was chillingly clear. In Qin's empire, there was no room for opposition. Yet beneath this facade of control lay a man consumed by, specifically, the fear of death. That fear drove him to obsession. Ancient texts describe how he sent envoys across distant oceans, seeking mythical islands, said to hold the elixir of life. He surrounded himself with alchemists and mystics, desperate for a cure to mortality. He drank strange potions made with mercury, believing they would grant him eternal life. Ironically, those same potions may have poisoned his body. When it became clear that immortality in the physical world would never come, he turned to something he could control, his legacy. He commissioned the construction of a tomb so vast, so complex, that it would rival the very empire he had unified. It would be his eternal domain, and at the heart of that tomb was the Terracotta army. Thousands of warriors, everyone sculpted with individual features, hairstyles, uniforms, no two alike. These weren't mere decorations. They were meant to serve, to protect, to obey forever. Qin Shi Huang died in 210 BCE during a tour of his empire, but his influence endured. The system he created laid the foundation for imperial China, and his tomb, still largely untouched, remains one of the most mysterious sights in human history. He was a man who conquered death in the only way he knew how, by turning his fear into stone. And even now, more than 2,000 years later, the world still hears his echo through the silence of his buried army. Imagine an empire not in the skies, not on earth but beneath it, a world buried in silence, crafted for eternity. That was the vision of Qin Shi Huang. If he could not live forever, then his soul would rule forever. And to do that, he needed more than just a tomb. He needed an afterlife kingdom. Construction began early in his reign. Some records suggest he ordered work on his mausoleum as soon as he ascended the throne. It wasn't just a tomb, it was a sprawling underground city, and at its gates stood an army. Tens of thousands of clay soldiers, life-sized and battle-ready, positioned in rows like a real military force awaiting orders. These warriors were no ordinary statues. Each was unique, different faces, different builds, different expressions, some calm, others fierce. Their uniforms reflected rank, region, and function. There were foot soldiers, archers, cavalrymen, charioteers, every role you'd expect in an elite fighting force. It was a masterpiece of realism, detail, and discipline. And then came the scale. The Terracotta army was just one piece of a vast complex, believed to span nearly 38 square miles. It included command centers, stables, armories, and even places of entertainment. Historical records describe musicians, dancers, and servants, recreated in clay to ensure that the emperor would not want for anything in the afterlife. How is this even possible? Qin Shi Huang commanded a labor force of over 700,000 people. Artisans, engineers, prisoners, and conscripted workers labored day and night. The work was secretive, the punishments severe. The techniques used were astonishing. Some weapons show signs of anti-rust treatments. Statues were painted with now-lost pigments, and kilns fired to exact specifications. It was a colossal fusion of vision, engineering, and fear. And the most haunting part? This was not built to honor the emperor. It was built to sustain his power. The army wasn't a tribute. It was a tool and extension of his control. In life, Qin Shi Huang ruled China with an iron fist. In death, he wanted nothing less. The Terracotta army wasn't designed to inspire. It was built to intimidate. A permanent army for a permanent ruler, frozen in clay, waiting for orders that may never come. Beneath a quiet hill near Xi'an lies something few have ever seen, and none have entered. It's not just a tomb. It's the sealed heart of an emperor's dream of immortality, and what lies inside may be far stranger and darker than we ever imagined. Ancient records describe the mausoleum of Qin Shi Huang as a subterranean palace, built to mirror the empire above. It was meant to be eternal, protected not just by stone and soil, but by legend, secrecy, and fear. According to historian Sima Qian, the tomb included mountains, rivers, and seas created entirely underground. But these weren't ordinary rivers. They flowed with mercury. Recent soil tests around the burial mound revealed abnormally high levels of mercury, supporting ancient accounts. The element, once believed to hold magical properties, was used to simulate water and perhaps poison intruders. Rivers of mercury, flowing through stone channels, guarding treasures no one alive has seen. And then, there are the traps. According to texts, the tomb was rigged with deadly defenses, crossbows that would fire automatically at anyone who broke in, hidden pits, and poison mechanisms designed to preserve the emperor's rest by any means necessary. Whether these traps still function or ever existed is unknown, but the fear they inspire has kept the tomb sealed. The ceiling, it's said, was painted with constellations, gems, and pearls embedded to mimic the night sky. The floor, shaped like a map of the empire, complete with miniature palaces, towers, and fields. It wasn't just burial. It was rebirth. Qin Shi Huang's resurrection into a perfect, eternal world. But that world may have come at a terrible cost. Reports suggest that artisans and workers were sealed inside after the tomb was completed, buried alive to protect its secrets. Some sources claim that the emperor's concubines were also entombed, their loyalty forced to extend beyond life. All of it's the army, the architecture, the rivers of Mercury was built to ensure that Qin Shi Huang's rule would continue beyond death, but so far, no one has dared open the central tomb. Because the truth is, we don't know what's inside, and once the seal is broken, we can never put it back. In early 2025, something extraordinary emerged from the soil near the southern quadrant of Pitwan, a discovery that would send shockwaves through the archaeological world. It wasn't just another warrior, it was someone different, someone who seemed to rise above the others. The team was led by Dr. Mei Lin, a veteran archaeologist who had spent over 15 years working on the site. Alongside her was a promising newcomer, Jiansu. What they found that morning would forever change how the world viewed the Terracotta army. Jian's trowel scraped something firm, smoother than typical terracotta. As the team carefully brushed away the surrounding earth, they realized this was no ordinary statue. It was massive, more intricately designed, and painted with faint, almost glowing traces of color that had somehow endured the centuries underground. What stood before them was a towering clay figure of a general, life-sized, yet commanding, in a way that made the other statues feel like mere shadows. His armor was ornate, his stance proud and purposeful. His breastplate bore coiling dragon motifs, long associated with elite military power. His boots were etched with markings unseen on any other statue, and his headdress, elaborate, regal, and unmistakably unique, suggested this was no common officer. The most haunting detail: his eyes. They weren't blank or tranquil like the others. They were sharp, intense eyes that seemed to carry thought, memory, judgment. I have studied thousands of warriors, Dr. Lin later said in an interview, but this one had presence. It wasn't just sculpture, it was personality. Surrounding him were sculpted chariots pulled by 4 powerful clay horses. Their muscles were carved mid-stride, their nostrils flared, their heads raised. The craftsmanship was staggering. Even the reins and wheels bore detailed engravings, some believed to be ancient military scripts or coded messages still being analyzed by scholars today. Theories erupted across the academic world. Some experts believed this figure represented a real historical figure, perhaps Qin Shi Huang's most trusted general, a man elevated in both life and death. Others speculated the unique symbols on his armor weren't decorative, but attempt to shield the tomb from intruders, or perhaps, as some fringe theorists suggested, a warning about powers not fully understood. What made this general even more mysterious was his location slightly removed from the primary formation. Was he a guardian of something deeper? A sentinel meant to watch over secrets still buried? Su reflected on the moment with awe. He's not just a statue. He's a message. We've uncovered his face, but not his story. That part's still hidden. The general remains at the site, untouched by relocation but fully digitized. Experts now pore over every contour, every detail, every trace of pigment. The more they study him, the more questions emerge. Why was he different? What secrets was he meant to protect? And why, after more than 2,000 years, did he finally rise from the earth? Now, for decades, the Terracotta army was admired for its scale and artistry. But thanks to 21st century science, we're beginning to see them not just as sculptures but as evidence of a civilization far more advanced than anyone imagined. One of the most astonishing revelations: these warriors were once painted in vivid, lifelike colors. Reds, blues, purples, greens. Each figure wore a distinct palette, giving the army a terrifying realism when first entombed. Over time, exposure to air caused these pigments to flake and vanish. But using non-invasive techniques like infrared spectroscopy and X-ray fluorescence, researchers have detected microscopic traces of those ancient paints still clinging to the clay. Advanced imaging has even allowed digital reconstructions, revealing what the Terracotta army may have looked like in its prime: vibrant, fierce, and hauntingly alive. But color was only the beginning. When scientists began analyzing the warriors' bronze weapons, swords, spears, and crossbows, they found something even more surprising. Many of these weapons had remarkably sharp edges, and appeared almost untouched by rust, despite being buried for over 2,000 years. Upon closer inspection, researchers discovered traces of chromium oxide on the surfaces, an anti-corrosion coating previously thought to have been invented in the 20th century that changed everything. Further study revealed that the weapons weren't made randomly. They were produced using a highly organized system, much like a modern assembly line. Components were crafted in separate workshops, marked with inscriptions identifying their makers, then assembled with consistency and speed. It wasn't just craftsmanship, it was early mass production. The organization needed to coordinate thousands of workers, manage quality control, and maintain uniformity points to a level of industrial and bureaucratic sophistication rarely seen in the ancient world. Even the creation of the statues themselves was methodical. Warriors were assembled from standardized parts: torsos, limbs, heads sculpted and fired in massive kilnets. Artisans specialized in specific features, from hair curls to armor detail. Each warrior was unique, but their construction followed a repeatable, strategic system. Today, thanks to 3D scanning, artificial intelligence, and digital archaeology, new details emerge constantly. Researchers can now detect subtle tool marks, material compositions, and hidden inscriptions invisible to the naked eye. With every scan, every test, we move closer to understanding not just how they were made, but how advanced their makers truly were. This wasn't just an ancient empire. It was a technological marvel. It's one of the greatest archaeological sites on Earth, and yet, its most important chamber has never been opened. The central tomb of Qin Shi Huang remains sealed, untouched, and full of mystery. Why? Because what lies inside could be more fragile, more dangerous, and more valuable than anything ever discovered. The tomb sits beneath a massive earthen mound near Xi'an. Ground-penetrating radar and remote sensing have revealed a vast, complex chamber hidden within. Scholars believe it may hold the greatest insights into the emperor's world, but no physical excavation has been attempted. Not out of superstition, out of caution. Experts fear that opening the tomb too soon could destroy its contents. Delicate materials, silk, lacquered wood, scrolls, even human remains may have survived in a perfectly sealed environment, but once exposed to air, moisture, and microbes, they could crumble in a matter of hours. The loss would be irreversible. And then there's the mercury. Ancient texts describe rivers of the toxic metal flowing through the tomb's underground halls. Recent soil tests have confirmed extremely high mercury levels in the area, validating the old accounts. These weren't symbolic features, they were actual liquid channels, created to simulate China's rivers and possibly protect the tomb from intruders. The risks to modern excavators are real, but beyond physical hazards lies another ancient fear. Traps. According to historical writings, the tomb was outfitted with deadly defenses, crossbows rigged to fire automatically, pits hidden behind false walls, and even mechanisms that could release poison. While these traps remain unconfirmed, the possibility alone has kept archaeologists at bay for decades. Despite this, the temptation grows. Many believe the tomb could hold treasures beyond imagination: gold, jade, written records, maps, and items that could rewrite ancient history. More than artifacts, they hope to uncover the emperor's mind, his secrets, his obsessions, his final message to the world. But archaeology today isn't about greed, it's about preservation. That's why scientists are working on new methods: robotic probes, climate-controlled chambers, and laser imaging to explore the tomb without disturbing it. Until then, it remains untouched, a sealed vault of history, waiting under centuries of silence, and we wait with it because, once it opens, the past won't just whisper, it will roar. Whisper. It will roar. The discovery of the Terracotta Army didn't just change archaeology, it changed China. It gave a forgotten village a place on the global map and reminded an entire nation of its extraordinary past. For China, the Terracotta warriors became a symbol of resilience, ingenuity, and legacy. They weren't just ancient relics, they were proof that Chinese civilization had achieved incredible complexity more than 2,000 years ago. In classrooms, students began learning more about the Qin dynasty. In museums, the warriors drew millions, and in popular culture, they became icons of national pride. The impact stretched far beyond borders. For years, much of the world's fascination with ancient history centered around Greece, Rome, or Egypt. The Terracotta Army disrupted that narrative, showing the world that East Asia had its own monumental legacy, equally complex, equally inspiring. Artists found new inspiration in the warriors' realism and individuality. Historians reevaluated China's early engineering feats and centralized systems. Writers and filmmakers turned the army into a symbol of mystery, ambition, and eternal loyalty. Themes of immortality, power, and control echoed far beyond textbooks, the very fabric of global storytelling. Even today, replicas of the warriors travel to cities across continents. From London to Los Angeles, millions have stared into the faces of these silent soldiers. And every time, people ask the same questions. Who were they? Why were they made? What secrets do they still keep? The Terracotta Army didn't just preserve the past, it reignited it. It reminded the world that beneath every quiet field, behind every legend, history is waiting to be uncovered. It teaches us that the ancient world isn't gonna simply buried, waiting for curious minds to unearth it. And sometimes, the greatest stories aren't the ones we write, but the ones we dig up. Even after decades of study, thousands of hours of excavation, and millions of words written, the Terracotta Army remains silent. And that silence speaks volumes. Because for every question we've answered, new ones rise from the dust. We know the warriors once stood in vibrant colors. But how did those pigments survive so long? What recipes did ancient artisans use? And can we ever restore them fully? We know each figure is unique, every face, every detail. But were they modeled after real people? Soldiers from the emperor's army? Artists? Prisoners? Or were they imagined manifestations of power rather than portraits of individuals? The weapons found with the army hint at advanced manufacturing techniques, But if Qin's engineers had such mastery, why was so much knowledge lost after his death? What other technologies might have vanished with the fall of the Qin dynasty? And then, of course, there's the emperor himself. His tomb remains sealed, his remains untouched. His world buried? Did he truly believe he could rule beyond death? Or was he trying to send a message? Centuries in the making. As science advances, we move closer to answers. But the Terracotta army continues to resist complete understanding. It guards more than just a tomb. It guards a Lagusha warning, perhaps, about obsession, control, or the cost of immortality. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the true power of the Terracotta army isn't in what it reveals, but in what it withholds. A mystery that endures. A puzzle still missing its final piece, so what do you think? Are we ready for what lies beneath the surface? Or are some secrets meant to stay buried? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to explore more hidden histories and ancient enigmas, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more.